Appreciate it. Now, it's been a while since we've answered viewer questions about gardening, so today we're going to ask the garden guy about some seasonal questions he's been asked recently. Garden expert Derek Thomas with Thomas Landscapes joins us now. Good to see you, as always, sir.
Good to see you, Tony.
I see you've spared no expense with the props today.
Well, you know, it's
a little lean,
a little bit of trimmings just to illustrate one of the questions that we're going to answer.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's get to them because these are all very specific questions. The first one is, why don't you read it because I'm having issues here. I have a Bradford pear.
And the viewer has a Bradford pear,
yes.
And
that's a tree.
It's a tree,
yeah.
And this viewer had several Bradford pears that they had planted, and the Bradford pears were starting to fall apart. And one of them they had cabled, and they wanted to know. Cabling is, and these are the green trees in here are young Bradford pears.
Okay.
Cabling is when you actually use a cable and you run it through a limb that is in danger of snapping off,
gotcha.
And you secure it to the center of the tree.
Okay.
And their arborist is basically suggesting that they spend more money maintaining this tree, and they wanted to know had they reached a point of no return. The problem with Bradford pears is that they were, and they still are, highly oversold. They're a beautiful, beautiful tree. As you can see here, the foliage is nice. They're the trees that you'll see that look like enormous white pom-poms in early spring when they flower. One of their problems is they're very fast-growing. It's a softwood, and their center of gravity is very low. So as they start to grow, they create these enormous spears that can't sustain themselves, and in the high winds of summer storms they have a propensity to break off.
Okay.
So you'll see that people will try to save the trees. The other thing that has happened is the Bradford pear was a cultivar that was supposed to be sterile. It's not. And so it's also become invasive. And you'll see it along the Beltway. You'll see great examples of it in the springtime. It's taking over.
Okay.
So, you know, what I tend to suggest to people with Bradford pears, if the pear can be pruned from the start, do that. If not, you know, if it's starting to break off, go ahead and think about replacing it with something that's more attractive.
Okay, very good. Next question. Now that my mums and other flowering plants are fading, what can I use to beautify my front entry?
You know, this is always a question because holiday time's coming up.
Sure.
You know, and our lean prunings and trimmings, as you call them, were just illustrative. You know, this is a fall camellia. This is blooming right now and is going to continue to bloom through Christmas.
Okay.
You've got hollies, and then you've also got different evergreens. All of those things are great things to use in that front entryway during the fall season. You know, don't be afraid to mix it up a bit. You know, here's a great example of what a camellia can look like in that front, just to add that pop. The chrysanthemums are done. Maybe your front is a little bit bigger and a little bit more formal. You don't want to just go with pansies. These are beauty berries. These are, you know, absolutely gorgeous. And until the mockingbirds find them, you actually have a pop of purple in your front landscape.
Right. They may not last for long, depending on the birds that are coming by.
Exactly.
I want to get to the last question. I've heard you talk of creating a focal point in the landscape using a specimen plant. What is this technique, and why is it a good idea? The focal point.
You know, a focal point is something that draws you into the landscape. People create landscapes because they want to add beauty. This weeping Atlas cedar is going to be something that people will focus on, and then you create your landscape around this plant. So the plant does not have to be the center, but it is something that is focal. It's something that brings people in. It draws them into your landscape, and you build from there. You can also use a fountain. You know, if it's not a specimen plant that you're using, you can use a piece of garden art. But there are a lot of really interesting plants that you can use as the springboard when you're creating the garden.
You can talk to a professional. They'll give you ideas on what might be good.
Absolutely.
All right, very good. Appreciate it. Derek Thomas, Ask the Garden Guy. Thank you for coming in and answering those questions.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you for sending the questions in. Speaking of questions, we've got the answer to today's trivia question. That's coming up next. We'll be right back.